My husband bought his work wife a $2.3 million penthouse with our money from our joint investment account, the same account we'd been building for 7 years to buy our dream home together, and he thought I'd never find out. So I did what any self-respecting woman with a finance degree, a photographic memory for account numbers, and absolutely nothing left to lose would do. I bought his company, the whole thing, every single share, and then I fired him on his birthday in front of everyone he'd ever tried to impress, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we continue, guys, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos like this one. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this story ends because what started as a devastating betrayal turned into the most satisfying revenge I've ever lived through. Now, let's get into it. Let me take you back to the beginning, because I need you to understand exactly how calculated this man was, exactly how long he played me, and exactly how spectacular his downfall ended up being. My name is Vanessa. I'm 34 years old. I have a master's degree in finance from Columbia University. I spent 8 years working at one of the top investment banks in New York before transitioning to private wealth management. I am not, by any reasonable measure, a stupid woman, but love makes you blind in ways that no amount of education can prepare you for. I met Marcus when I was 25 at a charity gala in Manhattan. He was 28, magnetic, ambitious, the kind of man who walked into a room and rearranged the energy. He just started his own tech consulting firm with $150,000 in seed money from his father, and he had this infectious confidence about where it was going. By the time dessert was served, I was completely captivated. We dated for 2 years before he proposed with a $47,000 Harry Winston ring on the rooftop of the Plaza Hotel. It was cinematic. It was perfect. Everyone said we were the golden couple, the power duo, the ones who had it all figured out. We got married in a ceremony that cost $185,000, most of which I paid for because his company was still growing, and I was the one with the stable 6-figure income. I didn't mind. That's what partners do. They invest in each other. They build together. They sacrifice individually for collective gain. At least that's what I thought we were doing. For 7 years, I poured everything into our marriage and into supporting Marcus's dream. When his company needed a $400,000 cash injection to survive its 3rd year, I liquidated my personal retirement account without hesitation. When he needed someone to restructure his business finances, I spent nights and weekends doing it for free work that would have cost him $200 an hour from any other financial consultant. When his company finally started turning a profit in year 4, I was the one who'd kept us afloat financially, while every dollar he earned went back into growth. By year 7 of our marriage, his company, Meridian Tech Solutions, had grown from a one-man operation to a firm worth approximately $12.4 million. He had 47 employees, 3 major corporate clients, and a reputation in the industry that opened every door. And I was proud, genuinely proud, because I'd helped build that. My financial expertise, my sacrifices, my unwavering support had been the foundation beneath every one of his achievements. But here's what I didn't know. While I was building his empire, he was building an escape route, and the architect of that escape was a woman named Priya Malhotra. Priya joined Meridian as Marcus's executive assistant 4 years ago. Within 6 months, she'd been promoted to Director of Client Relations, a title Marcus created specifically for her. Within a year, she was his right hand, his confidant, his work wife. She was 29 when she started, gorgeous, ambitious, and single. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I worked in finance. I understood professional relationships. I had male colleagues I was close with. I wasn't the jealous type, or at least I thought I wasn't because I'd never been given a reason to be. Marcus talked about Priya the way you talk about a talented colleague. She's incredible at her job. She saved the Henderson account. She has this amazing ability to read clients. Fine, great. I was happy he had someone competent helping him run things. It meant less stress for him and less of his work anxiety bleeding into our home life. What I didn't realize was that every compliment about Priya was a breadcrumb on a trail leading directly to my destruction. The first real warning sign came about 2 years ago. Marcus started working late, not just occasionally, but 4, sometimes 5 nights a week. He'd come home at 10, 11 p.m., sometimes after midnight, always with the same explanation. Client deadlines, investor meetings, project crises. I believed him because I had no reason not to, and because I was busy with my own demanding career. Then the weekend conferences started, 2-day trips to Boston, 3-day summits in Chicago, a week-long tech expo in San Francisco, always with Priya because she handled the client relationships and needed to be there, always at nice hotels, always with dinners and events that ran late. I'd get texts at 1 a.m., still at the networking dinner. Priya says these connections are going to land us a huge contract. Don't wait up, babe. I didn't wait up, I trusted him. I went to sleep in our king-sized bed alone and told myself this was what it took to build something great, that the sacrifice was temporary, that once the company was established, we'd have all the time in the world. I was such a fool. The second warning sign was the money. About 18 months ago, I noticed our joint investment account, the one we'd been growing for years specifically to buy our dream home, had a $50,000 discrepancy. I mentioned it to Marcus casually one evening over dinner. He barely looked up from his phone. Business expense. Had to cover a client entertainment tab. I'll replace it next quarter. I let it go. $50,000 was significant, but the account had over $1.8 million in it at that point, accumulated over 7 years of both of us contributing. He'd put it back. No big deal, except he didn't put it back. And 3 months later, another $75,000 was gone, then $120,000, then $200,000. Every time I brought it up, there was an explanation. Emergency business expense, unexpected tax obligation, equipment upgrade for the office, investment in a new project that would triple our returns. And every time I accepted the explanation because questioning Marcus about money felt like questioning his competence, and he had a way of making me feel small when I pushed back. You know I'm good with money, Vanessa. You know I wouldn't spend it without good reason. Do you really need me to justify every business decision to you? I thought we were partners, not auditor and client. That's how he'd frame it. Every legitimate concern became an attack on his character. Every question became evidence of my controlling nature. And slowly, gradually, I stopped asking. I stopped checking the account. I stopped paying attention to the numbers. The finance expert stopped doing finances because her husband made her feel crazy for caring about money. Looking back, that was the most dangerous thing I ever did, because while I was looking away, Marcus was draining our future, and Priya was spending it. The discovery happened on a random Tuesday afternoon 3 months ago. I was home early from work with a migraine, lying on the couch with my laptop, when a notification popped up from our bank's secure messaging system. It was a PDF statement for an account I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a glitch, a statement sent to the wrong email, but the account holder's name was Marcus Jonathan Webb, my husband. It was a separate savings account at a different bank than we used jointly, an account I'd never seen, never been told about, never even suspected existed, and the balance was $847,000. $847,000 in a secret account, while our joint investment fund had mysteriously shrunk from $1.8 million to $623,000 over the past 18 months. My migraine was instantly forgotten. My hands were shaking as I started pulling records. See, here's the thing about being a finance professional. When I actually decided to look, I knew exactly where to look and exactly what to look for. Within 2 hours, I'd uncovered a financial trail that made my blood turn to ice. Marcus hadn't just been skimming from our joint account. He'd been systematically transferring money for over a year to multiple accounts I'd never known about. The secret savings account with $847,000, a brokerage account with $312,000 in investments, a checking account with $156,000 in available funds, total hidden assets, approximately $1.315 million. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what he'd been spending it on. I found credit card statements, not our joint cards, but personal cards in his name only, cards with charges that told a story I'd been too trusting to read. Bulgari, $23,000 necklace, Cartier, $18,500 bracelet, Tiffany, $14,000 earrings. None of these were for me. I would have known if my husband had bought me $55,000 worth of jewelry. He hadn't even bought me a birthday present last year. Said things were tight at work. Then came the charges that nearly stopped my heart. Real estate closing costs, $46,000. Property management fees, $3,200 monthly. Interior design services, $87,000. Furniture delivery, $42,000. All connected to a property address I'd never heard of, a penthouse apartment in Tribeca. I looked up the address, 48 Late Street. Penthouse B, a luxury 2-bedroom penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, a private terrace overlooking the Hudson River, and a chef's kitchen with marble countertops. Purchased 6 months ago for $2.3 million. The down payment had come from our joint account, our dream home fund, the money we'd saved together for 7 years. He'd used $460,000 of it as a down payment on a penthouse for another woman. How did I know it was for Priya? Because the interior design invoices were addressed to Ms. Priya Malhotra, C.O. Marcus Webb. Because the furniture deliveries were signed for by P. Malhotra. Because the property management company had her listed as the primary resident. My husband had bought his work wife a $2.3 million penthouse with our savings, and furnished it with our money, and gifted her tens of thousands in jewelry, while telling me we couldn't afford to renovate our kitchen. I sat on that couch for 3 hours without moving. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, letting the full scope of the betrayal wash over me like a wave, cataloging every lie, every excuse, every late night, every business trip, every time he'd made me feel crazy for asking questions. And then something clicked in my brain. The part of me that was a heartbroken wife stepped aside, and the part of me that was a financial strategist stepped forward. Because here's what Marcus had apparently forgotten in the fog of his affair. I wasn't just his wife. I was the woman who'd restructured his entire company's finances. I knew every account, every investor agreement, every debt obligation, every contract clause. I knew things about Meridian Tech Solutions that Marcus himself had probably forgotten. And I knew something very, very specific, something that Marcus clearly thought didn't matter anymore, something that was about to become the most expensive oversight of his entire life. When I'd helped restructure Meridian's finances during its rocky third year, I'd set up the company's shareholder agreement. Marcus held 68% of the company's shares. His silent investor, a man named Gerald Foster, held 22%, and the remaining 10% was held in a trust that Marcus had set up in my name as a gesture of partnership. He told me at the time that it was symbolic, that he wanted me to feel like a true partner in everything he built. Symbolic, 10% of a $12.4 million company. That's $1.24 million in shares that Marcus had apparently forgotten existed, but I hadn't forgotten, because I'd been the one who drafted the shareholder agreement, and I knew something else, something buried in the fine print. The agreement included a right of first refusal clause. If any shareholder wanted to sell their shares, the other shareholders had the right to match any outside offer. But more importantly, it included a clause I'd written specifically to protect the company from hostile situations. Any shareholder with proven evidence of financial malfeasance by the majority shareholder could trigger a forced audit, and if the audit confirmed misuse of company funds, the board could vote to restructure ownership. Marcus had been using company accounts to fund personal expenses. I'd seen the charges: business dinners that were actually dates with Priya, client entertainment that was actually jewelry shopping, conference travel that was actually romantic getaways. Every one of those charges was financial malfeasance. Every one was a nail in his coffin, and I had access to every receipt, every statement, every record. But I wasn't going to rush this. Marcus had spent 18 months carefully building his escape. I was going to spend the next 8 weeks carefully building his destruction, and I was going to do it with the same meticulous attention to detail that I'd used to build his company in the first place. Week 1 was reconnaissance. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made any moves. I hired a private investigator named Sandra Chen, the best in the city, recommended by a divorce attorney colleague of mine. Sandra cost $15,000 up front, and she was worth every penny. Within 5 days, Sandra had confirmed everything and uncovered things I hadn't even suspected. Marcus and Priya had been in a full relationship for at least 2 years, probably longer. They had regular date nights at restaurants across the city, always in neighborhoods where they were unlikely to run into anyone who knew me. They'd taken 6 trips together in the past year alone, trips Marcus had told me were business conferences. Sandra got photos: Marcus and Priya holding hands walking through Central Park, Marcus and Priya kissing outside a restaurant in the West Village, Marcus and Priya entering the Tribeca penthouse together with grocery bags like a couple coming home, Marcus and Priya at a couple's massage at a spa in the Hamptons. The same weekend Marcus told me he was at a tech summit in Boston. But Sandra's most devastating discovery was about Priya herself, because Priya Malhotra wasn't just Marcus's side piece. She was a professional at this. Sandra ran a deep background check and found that Priya had a pattern. Before Marcus, she'd worked as an executive assistant at 2 other companies run by married men. Both times, she'd positioned herself as indispensable, started affairs with the founders, extracted significant financial benefits, and disappeared when things fell apart. The first man, a software developer in Seattle named Richard Cho, had lost $380,000 and his marriage before Priya moved on. The second, a marketing agency owner in Los Angeles named James Whitfield, had lost $520,000, his company, and his relationship with his 2 kids. Priya had walked away both times with the money and 0 consequences. She was a predator. She targeted successful married men, wormed her way into their professional lives, seduced them, extracted wealth, and vanished. And my brilliant husband, the CEO, the visionary, the man who thought he was smarter than everyone in the room, had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. But here's where it gets truly insane. Sandra discovered that Priya was already laying groundwork with her next target, a venture capitalist named Derek Morrison. She'd been attending his speaking events, engaging with him on LinkedIn, positioning herself for the transition. She wasn't planning to stay with Marcus. She was planning to drain him dry and move on to someone richer. My husband had torpedoed our marriage and spent over $1 million of our money on a woman who was literally planning to leave him for someone with deeper pockets. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. While Sandra gathered intelligence, I started phase 1 of my plan, securing my own financial position. This required absolute discretion. Marcus couldn't know anything had changed. I had to keep playing the role of the trusting, oblivious wife while I systematically prepared for war. First, I consulted with the most aggressive divorce attorney in New York, a woman named Catherine Blackwell, who charged $850 an hour and had a reputation for leaving opposing husbands in financial ruins. Catherine took one look at my evidence, smiled like a shark who just spotted a wounded seal, and said, "Oh, this is going to be fun." Catherine walked me through my legal position. In New York, marital assets include anything acquired during the marriage, regardless of whose name is on it. That penthouse Marcus bought for Priya, marital asset. The secret accounts, marital assets. The company shares, we'd need to fight for those, but given the financial malfeasance, we had an incredibly strong case. Catherine estimated that in a divorce, I'd be entitled to at least 50% of all marital assets, plus potential additional claims for dissipation of marital funds. That's the legal term for when a spouse wastes marital money on an affair. She estimated the dissipation claim alone could be worth $1.5 million. But I didn't just want a divorce settlement, I wanted the company. Catherine raised an eyebrow and asked me to explain. I told her about the shareholder agreement, the right of first refusal, the financial malfeasance clause. She read the documents and her shark smile got even wider. "This is airtight," she said. "You wrote this yourself." I confirmed that I had. She shook her head in admiration. "Your husband let a financial genius draft the agreement that's going to destroy him. That's poetic." Catherine's strategy was elegant. We wouldn't trigger the financial malfeasance clause yet. First, we'd approach Gerald Foster, the silent investor with 22% of the company. If Gerald would agree to sell his shares to me, or ally with me in a forced restructuring, we'd have 32% of the company to Marcus's 68%. Not enough for outright control, but enough to force the audit. And once the audit revealed that Marcus had been embezzling company funds for personal use, the board could vote to strip his majority ownership. In the best-case scenario, Marcus would lose controlling interest in his own company. In the worst case, he'd face criminal charges for embezzlement. I met Gerald Foster at his country club on a Saturday morning. Gerald was 62, old money, conservative, and above all, protective of his investments. He'd put $800,000 into Meridian over the years and expected both returns and integrity. When I showed him the evidence of Marcus's financial misconduct, the color drained from his face. I showed him everything. The secret accounts funded by company money laundered through fake business expenses. The jewelry purchases charged to the corporate card as client gifts. The trips billed as conferences that were actually romantic vacations. The penthouse partially funded through inflated consulting fees that Priya had invoiced to the company for work she never did. That last detail was something Sandra had uncovered just days earlier. Priya had been billing Meridian for $18,000 a month in consulting fees on top of her salary, fees approved by Marcus, for services that existed only on paper. Over 2 years, that was $432,000 in fraudulent invoices. Company money, investor money, Gerald's money. Gerald was furious. Not the loud, explosive kind of furious, but the quiet, ice-cold, old money kind of furious that leads to phone calls with very expensive lawyers. He agreed to ally with me immediately, not just out of loyalty to me, though he'd always liked me, but because Marcus had stolen from him and he wanted blood. Gerald offered me something even better than an alliance. He offered to sell me his shares, all 22%, at a fair market price of $2.728 million. He said he wanted out of the company entirely and wanted to watch Marcus burn from a safe distance. The price was steep, but I had resources. My personal savings, separate from our joint accounts, totaled $890,000. My 401k from my years in banking was worth $340,000. I had stocks in my own name worth approximately $420,000, and Catherine had already filed an emergency motion to freeze the marital assets, meaning Marcus couldn't drain anything else before the divorce was finalized. But I still needed more. That's when my mother did something I'll never forget. My parents had always been careful with money. My father was a retired accountant, my mother a former school principal. They'd lived modestly and saved aggressively. When I told my mother what Marcus had done, she went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your grandmother left me $1.2 million when she passed. I've been saving it for something important. Destroying the man who betrayed my daughter sounds important enough." She wired me the money the next day. With my own funds and my mother's contribution, I had enough to purchase Gerald's shares and still have reserves for legal fees. The share transfer was completed quietly, handled by Catherine's firm to ensure Marcus received no notification until it was strategically advantageous. In a single transaction, I went from holding 10% of Meridian Tech Solutions to holding 32%. Marcus still held 68%. On paper, he still had majority control. But the shareholder agreement I'd written contained a provision that would change everything. Any evidence of financial malfeasance by a majority shareholder could trigger a board review, and if the board determined that the malfeasance was severe enough, they could vote to dilute the offending shareholder's stake by up to 50%. If Marcus's 68% was diluted by 50%, he'd be left with 34%, and I'd have 32%. Combined with the shares that would be redistributed from the dilution, the math was devastating for him. But I wasn't done planning, because I didn't just want to take his company. I wanted to humiliate him the way he'd humiliated me. Remember, this man had spent 18 months making me feel crazy for asking about missing money. He'd told me I was controlling when I questioned his late nights. He'd told me I was insecure when I worried about Priya. He'd told me I was too focused on material things when I asked about our dream home fund. Every legitimate concern had been weaponized against me. He'd even, and this still makes my jaw clench, started suggesting that maybe I should see a therapist for my anxiety, that maybe my trust issues were projections of my own insecurities, that maybe I needed to work on being more supportive and less suspicious. He'd gaslit me so thoroughly that there were actual moments I'd question my own sanity. So no, a quiet legal proceeding and a clean divorce weren't enough. Marcus needed to be exposed, and I knew exactly when and how to do it. Our 10-year anniversary was coming up in 6 weeks. Marcus had somewhat ironically been planning a big anniversary party, 200 guests, a rooftop venue in Midtown, an open bar, a live band, all of our friends, family, and professional contacts. He'd been presenting it as a celebration of our love, but I suspected it was actually his farewell performance, the grand finale before he left me for Priya. How did I know? Because Sandra had intercepted communications between Marcus and Priya discussing the timing. Marcus wanted to wait until after the anniversary party to file for divorce because, and I quote from his messages, "The party will make me look like the devoted husband. When I file afterward, everyone will assume she did something to push me away." He was planning to throw me a party and then divorce me, using the party as evidence of what a great husband he'd been. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. Fine, he wanted a party, I'd give him a party, one he'd never forget. For the next 6 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I was the loving wife, excited about the anniversary, helping with party planning, buying a new dress, gushing to friends about how romantic Marcus was being. Marcus was so convinced by my performance that he actually seemed guilty at times. He bought me flowers twice. He left a card on my pillow. He even initiated sex a few times, which I declined by saying I wanted to build anticipation for the anniversary. He bought that too. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was orchestrating a masterpiece of revenge. Catherine filed the emergency asset freeze without Marcus's knowledge, using a sympathetic judge who was appalled by the evidence of financial dissipation. The freeze meant Marcus couldn't move any more money, but it was done quietly enough that his accounts appeared normal on the surface. He just wouldn't be able to make large transfers. Sandra continued surveillance and uncovered additional evidence daily. She found that Priya had been using a company credit card for personal shopping sprees, $67,000 at Neiman Marcus in 1 month alone. She found that Marcus had leased a Mercedes-AMG GT under the company's name, but registered it to Priya's address. She found that they'd been planning a 2-week trip to the Maldives the week after the anniversary party, a trip booked using company funds. Their version of a honeymoon, presumably, for after he divorced me. Each revelation added fuel to a fire that I was keeping carefully controlled. No outbursts, no tears, no confrontations, just cold, systematic documentation of every dollar, every lie, every betrayal. I also reached out to Richard Cho and James Whitfield, Priya's previous victims. Both were shocked to learn she'd struck again, and both agreed to provide sworn statements about their experiences. Richard's testimony was particularly devastating. He described exactly how Priya had operated, the slow integration into professional life, the carefully manufactured emotional intimacy, the gradual financial extraction, the eventual disappearance. It was identical to what she was doing to Marcus. James Whitfield actually cried during our phone call. He said he'd lost everything, his wife, his company, his kids' respect, and he'd spent 3 years in therapy trying to rebuild. He said, and I'll never forget this, she makes you feel like you're the special one, like she sees something in you no one else does. But you're not special, you're just the next Mark. I felt a moment of sympathy for Marcus when James said that. Just a moment. Then I remembered the missing money, and the gaslighting, and the penthouse, and the sympathy evaporated like spit on a hot griddle. The weeks ticked by, the party was approaching, everything was in position. Gerald was ready to support the forced audit. Catherine had the divorce papers drawn up. Sandra had a comprehensive evidence file that would make any judge's head spin, and I had one more element planned, the piece de resistance. I'd had a conversation with Marcus's mother, Helena. Now Helena and I had always been close. She told me many times that I was the daughter she never had, that Marcus was lucky to have me, that she prayed every night for our happiness. When I drove to her house and showed her the evidence, she sat in her kitchen chair and aged 10 years in 10 minutes. She didn't cry at first, she just went very still and very quiet. Then she looked at me with eyes full of shame and said, I raised him better than this. His father would have been mortified. Marcus's father had passed away 5 years earlier, a good man who'd valued integrity above all else. The man who'd given Marcus his startup money with the words, build something you'd be proud to put your name on. Helena asked me what I was planning. I told her everything. She listened to the entire plan without interrupting, then nodded once and said, good, he deserves every bit of it, and I want to be there when it happens. His own mother, on my side, ready to watch the consequences land. The night of the anniversary party arrived, September 14th. A perfect fall evening, crisp air, city lights, the kind of New York night that makes everything feel significant. The venue was stunning, a rooftop space in Midtown with panoramic views, decorated with thousands of white flowers and twinkling lights. 200 of our closest friends and family, plus Marcus's business associates and clients, mingled with champagne glasses. I wore a red dress, not white, not pink, not the soft feminine colors Marcus preferred. Red, the color of war, the color of power, the color of a woman who knows exactly what she's about to do. Marcus was in his element, working the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations with a humble smile that I now recognized as pure performance. He'd even given a small speech earlier about how lucky he was, how Vanessa had been his rock, how 10 years felt like 10 minutes with the right person. Meanwhile, I noticed Priya had positioned herself at the bar, wearing a tight emerald dress, watching Marcus with a proprietary smirk. She wasn't supposed to be here as anything other than an employee, but she'd come dressed like a date, and Marcus kept finding excuses to drift toward her, touching her elbow, leaning in to whisper things that made her laugh. At our anniversary party, in front of our families, the disrespect was almost impressive in its brazenness. At 9 p.m., exactly as planned, I took the microphone. Marcus was across the room with Priya and his CFO, laughing about something. I tapped the mic and the room fell quiet. 200 faces turned toward me. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steady and clear. 10 years is a significant milestone. It's the kind of anniversary that makes you reflect on everything, the good, the bad, and the things you discover along the way. Marcus was smiling, assuming this was going to be a loving toast. I could see his mother near the front of the crowd, her face calm and resolved. Gerald Foster was by the bar, arms crossed, waiting. When I married Marcus, I continued, I promised to love him, support him, and build a life with him. And I did. For 10 years, I poured everything I had into this marriage and into helping my husband build his company, my retirement savings, my expertise, my time, my trust. I could see Marcus's smile starting to falter. Something in my tone was off, and he was beginning to sense it. I want to share something with all of you tonight because I believe in transparency, something my husband has taught me the value of, or rather, the value of its absence. I paused and looked directly at Marcus. His smile was completely gone now. 6 months ago, my husband used $460,000 from our joint savings, money we'd been building for 7 years to buy our dream home, as a down payment on a $2.3 million penthouse in Tribeca. Gasps, murmurs, Marcus's face went white. That penthouse is currently occupied by his director of client relations, Priya Malhotra, who is standing right over there by the bar in the green dress. Every head in the room swiveled toward Priya. Her face went from smirking to stricken in a heartbeat. Over the past 18 months, Marcus has transferred approximately $1.315 million from our joint accounts into secret personal accounts. He's purchased over $55,000 in jewelry from Ms. Malhotra. He's billed personal vacations as business conferences. And he's approved $432,000 in fraudulent consulting invoices submitted by Ms. Malhotra for services that were never rendered. The room was dead silent. You could hear the traffic 20 stories below. Marcus started walking toward me, his face a mask of fury and panic. "Vanessa, stop. You don't know what you're—" "I know exactly what I'm doing, Marcus. For the first time in 2 years, I know exactly what's happening." I turned back to the crowd. "But wait, there's more." I nodded to Gerald Foster, who stepped forward. Gerald's voice carried the authority of old money and righteous anger. "As a 22% stakeholder in Meridian Tech Solutions, I am formally requesting a forensic audit of the company's finances based on evidence of systematic financial malfeasance by the CEO, Marcus Webb. This request is being filed simultaneously with the company's board and legal counsel." Marcus looked like he'd been shot. "Gerald, what the hell?" "As of yesterday," I continued, "I am no longer a 10% shareholder of Meridian Tech Solutions. Gerald sold me his 22% stake. I now control 32% of the company. Combined with the dilution provisions in the shareholder agreement, which I wrote, and which you clearly never bothered to read carefully, your majority control of your own company is about to become a minority position." I'll never forget the look on his face. It was the look of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time, every lie, every scheme, every manipulation, crumbling simultaneously. His mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "One more thing," I said, pulling an envelope from my clutch. "These are divorce papers, irreconcilable differences in dissipation of marital assets. My attorney estimates I'm entitled to at least 60% of all marital assets, given the documented financial misconduct. That includes your share of the company, the penthouse you bought for your girlfriend, and the secret accounts you thought I'd never find." I walked over to Marcus, who was standing in the middle of the room like a statue, and pressed the envelope against his chest. He grabbed it reflexively. "Happy anniversary, Marcus." The room erupted. Some people were gasping. Some were whispering. A few of Marcus's friends were trying to lead him away. His mother walked up to him, looked him dead in the eye, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Your father would be ashamed of you." Then she turned and walked over to me, put her arm around me, and walked me to the elevator. Behind us, I could hear Priya trying to leave and being blocked by guests who were now very interested in having words with her. I heard Marcus shouting my name. I heard the murmurs of 200 people processing what they'd just witnessed. I didn't look back. The aftermath was a nuclear explosion in slow motion. Within 48 hours, the forensic audit of Meridian was underway. The auditors found everything, every fake invoice, every misclassified expense, every dollar that Marcus had funneled from the company to fund his affair. Total company funds misappropriated, $1.87 million. That included Priya's fraudulent consulting fees, the leased Mercedes, personal travel billed as business, jewelry purchased on corporate cards, and a dozen other creative accounting tricks that my husband thought he'd gotten away with. The board voted unanimously to invoke the dilution clause. Marcus's 68% stake was reduced to 34%. Combined with my 32% and the redistributed shares, I became the single largest individual shareholder of Meridian Tech Solutions. Not the majority shareholder, but the most powerful voice in the room. The board then voted, with my support, to remove Marcus as CEO. He was replaced on an interim basis by the company's COO, a brilliant woman named Rachel Torres, who'd been doing most of the actual work for years while Marcus took credit. Marcus tried to fight it. He hired lawyers, filed motions, made threats. But the evidence was overwhelming, and his own shareholder agreement, the one I'd written, the one he'd signed without reading the fine print, gave the board every legal right to do exactly what they'd done. His lawyers told him to settle. He refused, so Catherine Blackwell went to war. The divorce proceedings were brutal in the most satisfying way. Catherine presented the evidence systematically: the secret accounts, the penthouse, the jewelry, the fraudulent invoices, the surveillance photos, the text messages. Marcus's attorney tried to argue that the penthouse was a business investment and that his relationship with Priya was professional. The judge actually laughed at that, out loud, in the courtroom. Then she looked at Marcus's attorney and said, "Counselor, I've seen the photos. There is nothing professional about them." The divorce was finalized 4 months after the anniversary party. The settlement was devastating for Marcus. I received 65% of all marital assets, including the Tribeca penthouse, which I immediately sold for $2.45 million, a small profit thanks to the renovations Priya had so kindly oversaw with my money. I received my full share of the joint accounts, plus a $1.2 million dissipation judgment, meaning Marcus had to pay me back for the money he'd wasted on his affair. I kept my 32% stake in Meridian. Marcus kept his diluted 34%, but was barred from any operational role in the company he'd founded. Total financial impact on Marcus. He lost roughly $4.8 million in assets, his CEO position, his reputation, and his marriage. All because he couldn't keep his hands off his executive assistant and couldn't be bothered to read the documents his wife had drafted. But the universe wasn't done with Marcus yet. Remember Priya's pattern, the way she targeted successful married men, extracted wealth, and disappeared. Well, the moment the forensic audit began and the fraud charges became a possibility, Priya disappeared, literally. She cleaned out the checking account Marcus had set up for her, $89,000. She took every piece of jewelry he'd bought her. She abandoned the leased Mercedes at the airport, and she vanished. Her apartment was emptied overnight. Her phone was disconnected. Her social media profiles were deleted. Sandra did some digging and found that Priya Malhotra wasn't even her real name. She'd been using a false identity built on stolen documents. Her real name was Patricia Marsh from Akron, Ohio, and she had a trail of similar scams stretching back 8 years across 4 states. My husband hadn't just cheated on me. He'd fallen in love with a professional con artist who'd been playing him from day one. The woman he'd left me for, the woman he'd spent over $1 million on, the woman he'd blown up his entire life for, didn't even exist. She was a character in a grift, and he'd been the mark. When Marcus found out the truth about Priya, Patricia, whatever, I'm told he had a breakdown. Not the kind that earns sympathy, but the kind that comes from realizing you destroyed everything real in your life for something that was entirely fake. He'd been so busy feeling superior, so busy thinking he was smarter than me, so busy building his secret life that he never once questioned whether the woman he was building it with was legitimate. Richard Cho, Priya's first victim, contacted me after the story made rounds in their professional circles. He said, "She picks men who think they're too smart to be fooled. That's what makes them perfect targets. The irony would be funny if it weren't so pathetic." The criminal investigation into Priya, or Patricia, is ongoing. The FBI got involved because she crossed state lines and used wire fraud. Sandra says they're close to finding her, but honestly, I don't care anymore. She's Marcus's problem now. And Marcus, 3 months after the divorce was finalized, mutual friends tell me he's moved back in with his mother. Helena took him in because she's his mother, and that's what mothers do, but she's not coddling him. She told a friend of mine that she makes him watch financial literacy videos every night after dinner, and that she's signed him up for therapy twice a week. He's going to learn to be a decent human being if it kills both of us, she apparently said. His credit is destroyed. He owes $1.2 million in dissipation damages and has been making monthly payments from his remaining share of Meridian's dividends that are now controlled by a board that answers to me. He can't sell his shares without my approval per the right of first refusal clause. He's financially trapped in the company he built, watching it thrive under new leadership, while he gets a quarterly check that goes straight to paying off the consequences of his own stupidity. Meanwhile, Meridian is doing better than ever. Rachel Torres turned out to be a phenomenal CEO. Revenue is up 34% since she took over. We landed 2 major government contracts that Marcus had been too distracted to pursue. The company's valuation has increased from $12.4 million to $17.2 million in 6 months. My 32% stake is now worth approximately $5.5 million. The $400,000 retirement fund I liquidated to save Marcus's company in year 3, I've already earned it back twice over. The $460,000 he stole for the Penthouse down payment, recovered through the sale of the property. The $1.2 million my mother contributed. I paid her back within 2 months of the divorce settlement, with interest, and set up a trust in her name. Every dollar Marcus stole from me, I got back. Every dollar I invested in his dream, I recovered with profit. Every sacrifice I made in the name of partnership, I turned into personal wealth. The woman he tried to turn into a financial victim became the most powerful person in his professional world. And now for the part of the story that still makes me smile every single day. 6 months after the divorce, I'm sitting in my new office at Meridian. Yes, I took an active role in the company I now partially own, when I get a LinkedIn message from a woman named Keiko Tanaka. Keiko is the CEO of a Tokyo-based tech firm interested in a strategic partnership with Meridian. We schedule a video call. The call goes incredibly well. Keiko is brilliant, innovative, and exactly the kind of partner who could help Meridian expand into Asian markets. We talk for 2 hours about business, then another hour about life, careers, being women in male-dominated industries. She's funny and warm and makes me feel seen in a way I haven't felt in years. 3 weeks later, Keiko flies to New York for an in-person meeting. Over dinner at a small Japanese restaurant in the East Village, she tells me she's recently divorced too. Her ex-husband had similar delusions of grandeur and similar problems with honesty. We bond over shared experiences and laugh about the absurdity of men who think they're too clever to get caught. The partnership deal closes 2 months later. It's worth $8.3 million over 3 years and positions Meridian as a major player in the international market. It's the biggest deal the company has ever signed, and I negotiated every term. Marcus, who watches the company's quarterly reports from his mother's spare bedroom, had to read about it in the industry press. But the real prize isn't the deal, it's the friendship that came with it. Keiko and I have become incredibly close. She visits New York regularly, and I've already planned a trip to Tokyo. She's teaching me Japanese. I'm teaching her how to make my grandmother's recipes. We support each other's ambitions instead of competing with them. And yes, before you ask, there's someone new. Not a rebound, not a revenge relationship, but something real that grew naturally from a genuine connection. His name is David. He's a civil rights attorney I met at a charity event 3 months ago. He asked me to dinner by saying, and I quote, "I think you're fascinating and I'd love to hear more about your work, but only if you want to. No pressure, no expectations." No pressure, no expectations. After years of Marcus's demands and conditions and tests, those words felt like oxygen. David doesn't need me to prove my worth. He doesn't need me to sacrifice my career or learn to cook his mother's recipes or apologize for having boundaries. He shows up, he listens, he respects, and he makes me laugh until my stomach hurts. Is it serious? It's getting there, slowly, healthily, on terms that work for both of us. I told David the full story of Marcus on our 4th date. He listened without interrupting, then said, "So you're telling me you wrote the legal document that took down your own husband's company, negotiated the biggest deal in the company's history, and still found time to learn Japanese? Yeah, I'm definitely not smart enough for you, but I'd like to keep trying." I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my wine. That's the difference between a man who sees your strength as a threat and a man who sees it as something to admire. Marcus wanted me small. David wants me exactly as I am. Last week, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop near his mother's house. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the divorce was finalized. He looked diminished, older, like a man carrying the weight of his own decisions. He tried to talk to me, said he'd been doing a lot of reflecting, said therapy was helping him understand what he'd done wrong, said he was sorry, genuinely sorry for everything. I listened politely. Then I said, "I'm glad you're getting help, Marcus. I genuinely hope you become a better person. But you should know the best thing you ever did for me was betray me, because it forced me to become the version of myself I should have been all along." He looked like I'd slapped him, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. And the truth, when you've spent years running from it, hits harder than any insult. I walked out of that coffee shop and into a perfect autumn morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Keiko about our upcoming Tokyo meeting. Then one from David asking if I wanted to try a new restaurant tonight. Then one from Rachel Torres about Meridian's latest quarterly numbers, which were, once again, record-breaking. I stood on that sidewalk in the October sunshine and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Whole, not broken and rebuilt, not damaged and repaired. Whole, like every piece of me was finally in the right place. Marcus wanted a wife who'd stay small so he could feel big. He wanted a partner who'd stop asking questions so he could keep lying. He wanted a woman who'd sacrifice everything while he risked nothing. And when he didn't get that, he turned to a con artist who told him exactly what he wanted to hear. He lost his company, his money, his reputation, his marriage, and his dignity. He got scammed by the woman he left me for. He's living with his mother at 37, making payments on a $1.2 million judgment, watching his ex-wife run the company he built while dating a man who treats her like a queen. And me, I gained everything: a thriving career, a company I partially own, financial independence, real friendships, a relationship built on respect instead of control, and the unshakable knowledge that I am not the kind of woman who accepts less than she deserves. My last Instagram post was a photo from the rooftop of Meridian's new office space, the same Midtown neighborhood where Marcus had thrown our anniversary party. I'm standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows with the city spread out behind me, wearing a red power suit, holding a glass of champagne. Caption: they said I was too focused on the details. Turns out the details are what set me free. 10% became 32%. A shareholder agreement became a weapon. A betrayal became a beginning. Never underestimate a woman who knows the fine print. Mara commented, from almost victim to actual CEO energy. This is what happens when you bet against the smartest person in the room. David commented, the only fine print I'm interested in is wherever you sign your name. Helena, Marcus's own mother, liked the post. Marcus viewed it, he didn't react, but I imagine he read the fine print very carefully this time. Some people plan their escapes from marriage. Some people plan their escapes from people who don't deserve them. The difference is, one leaves you broke and broken in your mother's spare room. The other leaves you standing on a rooftop, champagne in hand, wondering why you didn't do this sooner. Marcus wanted freedom from our marriage. He got it. He just also got freedom from his money, his company, his reputation, and his self-respect. That's the thing about freedom. It cuts both ways. And I got freedom too, the real kind. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are, exactly what you're worth, and exactly what you refuse to tolerate ever again. To every woman sitting at home right now, staring at bank statements that don't add up, listening to explanations that don't make sense, being told your concerns are crazy and your boundaries are controlling, you're not crazy, you're not controlling, you're paying attention, and that's exactly what they're afraid of. Trust your instincts, document everything, know your rights, read the fine print, and when the time comes, don't argue, don't beg, don't cry, just execute. Because living well isn't just the best revenge, it's the only revenge that matters. And right now, I'm living very, very well. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel empowered, if it reminded you that you deserve better than being someone's backup plan, someone's secret, someone's fool, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Click the bell icon so you never miss another story like this one. Every week, we share stories of people who chose themselves when the world told them to settle, people who fought back when they were expected to fold, people who turned their worst moments into their greatest victories. Subscribe, click the bell, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, the fine print always matters, especially when you're the one who wrote it. Until next time, stay sharp, stay strong, and never ever settle.